Ever think about like how the people you just pass by on the street, just the ones who seem so ordinary, could be harboring some dark secrets?
Right.
Today, we're diving deep into this case that I think really exemplifies that idea.
Uh-huh.
Alexander Wayne Watson Jr., a seemingly average Maryland man, who turned out to be a serial killer.
Yeah.
Our main source for this is his Wikipedia entry,
Okay.
which lays out this chilling timeline of crime spanning almost a decade,
Rep.
from 1986 to 1994.
Okay.
But we're not just going to list the facts. We're going to unpack the psychology, the forensics, and this unsettling reality of how a killer can just live among us undetected for years.
Yeah, I mean, what makes cases like Watson so fascinating and disturbing is this very duality, right? On the surface, you have someone who blends into society, or, someone who might even be considered likable. But underneath, there's this darkness that most people can't even fathom.
Right, and that's what makes this case, I think, so gripping. So let's start with his early crimes, the murders of Boonton Anderson in 1986 and Mary Elaine Sharika in 1988.
Okay.
Both of these victims lived just miles from Watson, and he was actually acquainted with both of their families.
So this proximity is a detail that really jumps out at you. In many serial killer cases, there's this element of familiarity with the victims, even if it's just casual acquaintance. It speaks to a level of comfort, a chilling normalcy in operating within, like, a known social circle.
Almost like he was just hiding in plain sight.
Yeah.
And the brutality of these crimes themselves, sexual
Yeah.
assault, stabbing, strangulation, it's hard to comprehend how someone capable of such violence could maintain this facade of just normalcy.
Exactly. And even in these early crimes, if you look at his modus operandi, the way he carried out the murders, there are these similarities that suggest a pattern, a developing signature.
Speaking of modus operandi, for those listening who might not be familiar with that term, it essentially refers to a criminal's method of operation, their preferred way of committing a crime.
Right. It's like a fingerprint, but for behavior. And in Watson's case, the consistency in his approach, even in these early stages, it suggests a disturbing level of premeditation.
Okay, so let's fast forward then to 1993 and the tragic case of 14-year-old Lisa Kathleen Hannell.
Okay.
She disappeared on her way to Old Mill High School,
Right.
and they found her body the next day.
This case is particularly heartbreaking because it just shatters the sense of safety that we associate with everyday routines, A young girl just walking to school just like any other day. It's just this stark reminder that evil can intrude on the most ordinary moments.
Absolutely. And this time, there was no sexual assault.
Okay.
However, this seemingly insignificant detail emerged. A Newport cigarette butt found near Lisa's body.
Oh, wow.
This detail, as we'll find out, becomes absolutely crucial.
Okay.
This discarded cigarette contained DNA evidence. But back in 1993, the technology to fully utilize that evidence was still kind of in its infancy.
Think about it. If this happened even a few years later, Watson's story might have unfolded very, very differently. But in 1993, the science of DNA analysis was just beginning to take shape.
Right, so the Hannell case remained unsolved.
Okay.
And then a year later, 1994, we have the murder of Betty Jean Cobb.
Uh-huh.
This one seemingly had nothing to do with the previous cases.
Okay.
It was a robbery gone wrong at Cobb's workplace.
And it's this seemingly unconnected crime that ultimately leads to Watson's initial arrest.
Right.
He's convicted and sentenced to life for Cobb's murder, seemingly bringing that chapter to a close. But behind the scenes, a revolution was happening in forensic science.
Exactly, and this is where DNA technology really comes into play. While Watson was serving time, the world of forensics was rapidly advancing, leading to the creation of CODIS, the Combined DNA Index System.
Right.
This is a game changer in criminal justice.
Huge. So essentially, CODIS is a massive database that allows law enforcement agencies to compare DNA profiles from crime scenes to those of convicted offenders. Think of it as a high-tech fingerprint system, but instead of analyzing fingerprints, it's analyzing DNA. This allows investigators to connect seemingly unrelated cases, sometimes years or even decades after they've gone cold.
It's like a giant puzzle, and CODIS is helping investigators find those missing pieces.
Exactly.
And in Watson's case, CODIS would prove to be the key to unlocking the truth about his earlier crimes. We're back, and before the break, we were discussing how this creation of CODIS, really revolutionized criminal justice. It's incredible to think that this technology, which just seems so commonplace now,
Right.
was just emerging while Alexander Wayne Watson Jr. was serving his life sentence for that murder of Betty Jean Cobb.
It really highlights how rapidly forensic science has advanced, and the implications for solving cold cases are just, they're profound. Imagine the families of victims years later, finally getting these answers thanks to a DNA match. It's about more than just catching the perpetrator. It's about providing a sense of closure, of justice served.
Absolutely. And in Watson's case, CODIS would play a pivotal role in connecting him to those earlier unsolved murders.
Mm,
Remember that seemingly insignificant detail we talked about, the Newport cigarette butt found near Lisa Hanel's body.
right.
Well, in 2004, that cigarette butt became the key to unlocking the truth.
Over a decade after Lisa's murder, investigators finally had that technology to really analyze the DNA evidence from that cigarette butt.
Yeah.
And when they ran it through CODIS, they got a hit. The DNA matched Alexander Wayne Watson Jr., who was already serving a life sentence for the Cobb murder.
So this seemingly random piece of evidence, just discarded at a crime scene years earlier, became the linchpin in connecting these cases. It's like something out of a detective novel, except the stakes are all too real.
It really underscores the importance of that thorough forensic investigation, Every detail, no matter how small, could be crucial. And in this case, it was that discarded cigarette that just cracked the case wide open.
It's mind-boggling to think that a tiny detail like that could have such a massive impact.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, like, if Watson had just pocketed that cigarette butt, would he have ever been linked to these other murders?
That's a question that we can only speculate on, but it does highlight that element of chance that often plays a role in criminal investigations. Sometimes it's a seemingly random occurrence, a stroke of luck that leads to a breakthrough.
Right. And in this case, that stroke of luck, combined with those advances in DNA technology, led to justice for Buntum Anderson, Mary Elaine Shareka, and Lisa Hanel. Faced with this irrefutable DNA evidence, Watson pled guilty to all three murders in 2007.
It was a strategic move on his part, likely to avoid the death penalty. By accepting that responsibility, he ensured that he would spend the rest of his life in prison, but he wouldn't face execution.
But even in his confession, there was something unsettling. He denied any involvement in any other crimes.
Which leaves us with this chilling question. Were there other victims out there? We may never know for sure, but the possibility, however remote, hangs over this case like a shadow. It's a stark reminder that even when justice is served, there are often unanswered questions, those lingering doubts that can haunt us.
Absolutely. And this case raises so many questions about the nature of evil, like the psychology of a serial killer and the challenge of recognizing these individuals before they strike. It's easy to label someone like Watson a monster.
Yeah.
But I think it's more important to try to understand the factors that contribute to such horrific acts.
I agree. It's not about excusing their behavior, but about gaining a deeper understanding of the human psyche, those dark corners that we often shy away from. Perhaps by understanding the darkness, we can find ways to prevent future tragedies.
It's a complex and unsettling thought, but one worth exploring. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think we can truly understand the motivations of someone like Watson, or is it simply beyond comprehension?
That's a question that's plagued criminologists and psychologists for decades. There's no easy answer, but I think it's important to approach these cases with a combination of scientific curiosity and a recognition of the human element. We need to analyze the evidence, the patterns of behavior, but we also need to remember that we're dealing with individuals with complex histories and motivations that we may never fully grasp.
It's a delicate balance, isn't it? Trying to understand the darkness without becoming consumed by it. In this case, with its twists and turns, its reliance on forensic science, and its ultimately unresolved questions, is a perfect example of why we delve into these deep dives.
Exactly. It's about more than just recounting the facts. It's about exploring those complexities of human nature, the intersection of science and justice, and that enduring mystery that surrounds cases like this.
Well said. And speaking of mysteries, we've only scratched the surface of the ethical considerations surrounding DNA technology and its impact on our lives. We'll unpack those issues when we return for the final part of our deep dive into the chilling case of Alexander Wayne Watson Jr. We're back. And, as we've been discussing this case of Alexander Wayne Watson Jr., it really strikes me how this seemingly average Maryland man was just living this double life, committing these brutal acts while maintaining that facade of normalcy.
Yeah.
It's a chilling reminder that we may never truly know the people we interact with on a daily basis.
It's a thought that can keep you up at night, isn't it?
Yeah.
The idea that someone you might pass on the street, someone who seems so ordinary, could be capable of such darkness.
Yeah.
It really challenges our assumptions about human nature and makes us question our ability to judge character. Absolutely. Like, think about Buntam Anderson and Mary Elaine Sharika just going about their daily lives, jogging, working, completely unaware of the danger lurking nearby.
Right.
It's a stark reminder that evil can intrude on even the most mundane activities, shattering our sense of safety and security.
And it highlights the vulnerability we all share. No matter how cautious we are, how aware of our surroundings, there's always that element of chance of being in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Right, and that brings us back to Watson's chilling denial of any other crimes. Even after being convicted for the murders of Anderson, Sharika, and Haenel, he insisted that these were his only victims.
Which, of course, raises a deeply unsettling question. Were there others? Were there more victims out there whose cases remain unsolved? Perhaps forever linked to Watson but lacking that crucial evidence for a conviction? It's a thought that haunts this case, leaving a sense of unease even after justice has seemingly been served.
It makes you wonder about those cases that just remain cold, the family still searching for those answers.
And it underscores the incredible impact of DNA technology, not just for solving past crimes, but for potentially preventing future ones.
Exactly. That knowledge that DNA evidence can be used to link criminals to crime scenes, even years later, it acts as a powerful deterrent. Criminals can no longer assume they've gotten away with their crimes simply because they weren't caught immediately. That shadow of DNA evidence hangs over them, potentially for years to come.
It's like a silent guardian, watching, waiting, ready to expose the truth.
Right.
And as technology continues to advance, the potential for DNA analysis to solve crimes and bring closure to families will only grow.
We've come a long way since the early days of DNA fingerprinting. Now we can extract DNA from the tiniest of samples, analyze degraded samples, and use sophisticated algorithms to create more accurate DNA profiles. The possibilities are almost limitless.
It's fascinating and a little bit scary at the same time. The power of this technology is undeniable, but it also raises these important ethical questions. How do we ensure that DNA data is used responsibly? How do we protect individual privacy while also harnessing the power of DNA to solve crimes and bring justice to victims?
Those are crucial questions that society needs to grapple with. As with any powerful technology, there's always the potential for misuse. We need to establish clear guidelines and safeguards to ensure that DNA technology is used ethically and responsibly.
It's a delicate balance, finding that sweet spot between utilizing this incredibly powerful tool for good while also protecting individual rights and preventing those abuses. It's a conversation that needs to continue as technology advances and those implications of DNA analysis become even more profound.
And that, I think, is a fitting note to end on. The case of Alexander Wayne Watson Jr. is a stark reminder of that darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of seemingly ordinary lives. It's a story of brutal crimes, forensic breakthroughs, and lingering questions that may never be fully answered. But it's also a story about that relentless pursuit of justice, the power of science to illuminate the truth, and the ongoing challenge of navigating those ethical complexities of a rapidly evolving world.
Well said. And for our listeners out there, we hope this deep dive has left you with something to think about. The world of forensic science is constantly evolving, and the implications for our lives are profound. Stay informed, stay curious, and as always, thanks for joining us on the deep dive.